recorded the night after the Carabao Cup second round tie at Ashton Gate last night in front of just under 9,500 fans, where it finished City 0, Norwich City 1. Bit of a disappointment that. I hope for progression through to the third round, but we are where we are. I'm pleased to say that joining me today is regular Ian and also relatively regular Dave Fevs. Morning, chaps. Are we feeling blue this morning, or yellow, or green, or what? How are we feeling? You first, Dave. What do you think? What are you thinking?
I never feel blue. It's the wrong. I was going to say wrong half, wrong quarter of the city, isn't it? So not blue, but I'm not exactly from a football point of view feeling red either. So
yeah, not great. Ian, your thoughts? I mean, you're always, you're never backward in coming forward with what you think, but what are you thinking this morning?
It was mixed emotions, really. On the one side, I always want to see City win, never want to see us lose. On the other side, there's an element of relief because of two things. One, the size of our squad. Secondly, the number of injuries we've got long term. Although we heard last night we heard once again that Vyman isn't as bad as was first thought when he came off at Hull. But they still don't know an exact time for him to come back. So that's a little bit more hopeful, but we have heard that twice before, and we did hear it about Scott, and that turned out to be wrong. Yeah. So the way I feel is I don't think we've got the squad numbers to have a cup run. And particularly as we're not utilising the younger players. I would have liked to seen Yeboah and Arroyo start last night. I'm not talking about putting in half the under-21s. That'd be silly. But yeah. I'd like to see those two guys who've been, I'll call it regulars on the bench. I much prefer to see them play and start the game. And look, if they'd have done 45 minutes and it was going wrong for them, they can always be hooked. But at least we know where we are, rather than just throw them in when we've got even more injuries. So in myself, I'm 10 out of 10, always am. But in football terms, it's a combination of disappointment, relief, and concern as to what we're going to do. With Nigel Pearson saying we're not going to do anything in terms of incomings after the game. Concern as to how we're going to cope, because we are, I think, 2 injuries away from a crisis.
Yeah, I'd agree. Dave, the lineup, Norwich made 9 changes. They still look pretty good. Pearson was bemoaning the fact that, I don't have as big a squad as they've got. They were in the Premier League relatively recently. They got a new manager in Wagner. But our lineup, it sort of picked itself in your views. What were your thoughts when you saw that lineup had been listed there?
I guess the big surprise for me in the lineup was that we didn't play Dickey and Viner together and play Naismith in midfield. I thought that was what he'd do. I'm not saying it's necessarily what I'd do. I probably would have as well, in fairness. But I was surprised to see a kind of different centre-back combination. And I guess I probably thought Knight would play because he's a bit of a Duracell bunny, and I thought he'd be okay. But a bit like Ian's just said there, I never want us to go out in the cup. I always want us to progress. But if ever there was a season, and listening to Nigel Pearson's interview afterwards, where I think it would be a blessing in disguise, it was last night. Because I think in fairness, Nigel managed the 15 players that played last night pretty well, and without kind of going too far into the future, to use someone like Andy King for 90 minutes, who ain't going to start on Saturday against Swansea, was good. He's kept Pring back, he's kept Viner back, he's kept Matty James and Jason Nightbar half hour back as well. So I think he's actually used the limited squad pretty well, and obviously we've got Taylor Gardner-Hickman to come back in as well at the weekend. So that to me was the big positive last night, was that we managed the senior professionals well. I kind of a little bit, I just on your Boa looks exciting. I don't want to get too carried away on him just yet, but I think we'll see a lot of him this season if it's only from the bench. I think looking at people like Raf and Jamie Knight-Labelle who've been on the bench a bit, and I know it's under 21 football, but if we look at the results there and some of the goals they're conceding,
they've conceded 8 in the last 2, haven't they? Is that right?
It's something like that, but I'm not hearing, obviously we don't see them on Robin's TV anymore, but from the people I know that go or got kids in academy, I'm not sure they're pulling up the trees that they perhaps ought to be in under 21 football to sit on the bench. And I guess the other thing on that is if you put them on the bench and they're missing their under 21 football, and if they're not going to get on because they're not quite there and Nige don't want to expose them, it's almost kind of no point putting them on the bench. I said, Dave, we were talking very, very briefly yesterday that the movement to 9 subs kind of just exaggerates the situation. If we had 7 subs and they were the 7 we had last night, we'd probably sit there and think, it's not too bad. But 9 subs, it becomes a bit of a overindulgence to some extent. And
you talked there about 2 youngsters, Knight-Labelle and Royer, but again, I'll bring the name up into the equation. I'm surprised he's still hanging around the place. But where's Duncan Idahan fit in all this? Because he's sort of, is he persona non grata, or because you could have stuck one of them on the bench, couldn't you?
Yeah, he's been playing in the under 21s this season. I would imagine he's playing in the under 21s to hopefully put him in the shop window to try and move him on, I guess. But because he's certainly nowhere near the first team, is he?
Right. Okay. No, I go with that.
That's only my thoughts anyway.
Yeah. And I stick with you, Dave, on this. I thought Sykes last night seemed to be in a more central role early on. I thought he showed some nice touches in there.
Yeah, I think he did all right. I think, if you go back to his Oxford days, the seasons before he played kind of wide right for Oxford, that was his position, playing as a kind of number 8 or a more central attacking midfielder. So yeah, I was interested to see whether he was going to line up as a 10 behind Williams and King, but actually Williams played predominantly left of King and Sykes played right of King as a kind of as the 2/8s. I thought he had a reasonable game last night.
Yeah, not too bad. All right, let's get into the action. And Norwich knocked the ball around well. They seemed at ease on the ball. It wasn't a hot potato. First bit of action in, you saw this good cross from Plaqueta, and then there was a save that Max did. I mean, he's capable of doing those sort of saves, isn't he? But he does let it down with his distribution. I mean, what's your view on Max, Ian? Are those saves enough to sort of justify keeping him there as number 1 with a sort of number 2 that we've got at the moment in Harvey Wiles-Richards?
Well, and Harvey Wiles-Richards, I believe, played for the under 21s, and we had Stefan Bajic on the bench. Well, on what I've seen, it's a limited amount of Wiles-Richards and Bajic. And I had something interesting. I had a look at the emergency loan rules last night, Rule 57. And what it states is that you can bring in an emergency loan only if you haven't got any professional goalkeepers. Now, we've got 2 professional goalkeepers behind Max O'Leary. So with people saying, unless they're on some form of lesser contract, we won't be allowed to bring in an emergency loan if Max gets injured. So
is that right, Dave? You put your finger up there.
The rules are professional goalkeeper is someone who's played 5 or more games at the given level. So Harvey Wiles-Richards doesn't class as a professional goalkeeper, but Stefan Bajic does, because if you read a little bit further down 57, it also says or comparable league if they've played elsewhere in another country. And Bajic has played for Saint Etienne and Paul, so he won't qualify. So if Max did get injured, we wouldn't be able to bring in an emergency goalkeeper. We'd have to play Bajic, or we could play Harvey Wiles-Richards. But yeah, if this is why I thought we might have loaned out Bajic again this season to give us the option of bringing in an emergency goalkeeper if anything happened to Max, but that doesn't appear to be on the cards as it stands.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, first half chances for us, Dave, few and far between. One shot on target all night. That came just before the interval, and it was probably the only decent ball that Tanner did. But Naki could consider himself unlucky with that shot because he struck it well, didn't he?
Yeah, he did certainly hit it with some power, and it took a good save from Long. We had a chance early on as well when Mehmeti hit a shot that was kind of headed clear, which looked like it was heading for the far corner as well. But yeah, it was a game of two sides playing a lot of football kind of around their middle third, really. I think if anything, Norwich probably hit us a little bit more on the counter than through playing, well orchestrated moves. And I think, went in at half time, I thought 0-0. Yeah, probably we could do doing a bit better. But I thought we were in the game and not comfortable, but it was a fairly evenish first half.
It had the atmosphere. I took a couple of people along last night. One said it almost had the atmosphere of a pre-season friendly at times. Just the general atmosphere in the ground. It was hardly a febrile cup tie environment.
Yeah, I think Norwich's style of play in terms of playing out from the back and keeping the ball was, probably doesn't help her. It wasn't end to end as such, was it, to get the crowd going? I thought the crowd were actually quite good last night. I think sometimes night games you tend to get a more, I'll call it a football crowd rather than the people on Saturdays who could just go along because it's a kind of part-time fans. I was going to say it's probably a bit derogatory.
In fairness,
but I think you know what I mean.
Section 82 did try and get a bit of singing going in particularly in the second half. Ian, that Wells with that shot there. I know he scored at the weekend his first goal in open play in 20 games, but I think Tomo pointed this out to me in a text overnight. We say, oh my God, Naki Wells, if he goes. 30 goals in 144 games for us. That's sort of like almost 1 in 5. Well, it is 1 in 5, isn't it? I mean, should we be expecting more from him, or is it about the service, lack of, particularly?
Well, it's about the service, lack of, the way the team's set up. When you look at our squad, if you looked at a potential starting 11, and you looked at which players would you bet on to possibly score a goal, you'd pick on Naki Wells, Tommy Conway, and Andy Weinman, probably. Yeah. And if I said, which player would you think would be capable of scoring 10 or more goals in a season, you'd probably pick the same 3.
Yeah.
Now, Tommy's out, and the last time he was out, he missed 15 games. Andy's out, and we don't know exactly when he'll be back. He could be back Saturday. He could be back after the international break. We don't know. So he is our best hope. And as you've just said, I think it was 1 goal in 23 games from open play. So that doesn't scream at you, we don't need a bit of help up front. But I maintain that you could have the best number 9. You could have Harry Kane up there. But without the service, having said that, I mean, Naki did miss a sitter against Birmingham, but he doesn't often do that. Without the service and without a tweak in shape to enable us to play 2 strikers, I honestly don't think we're going to see us score many goals. I mean, it was all over the stats type forums. XG against Hull was just under 4. We scored 1, and that's because Joe Williams couldn't hit a cow's backside with a banjo as far as scoring goals is concerned. And other players, you'd think, well, if I said how many goals do you think Mark Sykes can pick up, you'd probably say, well, maximum 6 in a season. Yeah. Jason Knight, we don't really know yet, but I'd fancy him to be around about the same number. So there aren't many goals coming from all over the team. Sam Bell, once again, is probably another that you class in that bracket.
Well, I have to say, Ian, with Sam, he does look like most of the time he's played this season, he looks like little boy lost. Let's get into the second half action. Am I right in saying, Dave, just before they scored what proved to be the winning goal, did they hit the bar as well with some long range effort? I think they did. Didn't they?
No, it was quite close. It was about 12 yards out of kind of ball. Banks favourably for them, kind of in our inside left channel, and they broke on us from about 40 yards out. Played a ball into the box. Guy did a little back heel into the path of.
That's it.
I think it might have been Gibbs. Not sure.
It was, yeah, Gibbs. It was that hit the bar,
and he curled one from about 12, 14 yards onto the underside of the bar, and it bounced out. And you kind of think, phew. And then 2 minutes later, we give them the goal, which
take us through the goal, Dave, as you saw it, because I thought it was sloppy.
Well, commentators curse from me with Joe last night watching it as the ball got played over the top of Tanner. I'm going, you do well to keep that in. And on the stretch, McCallum did keep it in, got the ball to Placheta, and he rolled Dickey too easily. Unfortunately, I guess if you want to just not be overcritical of Dickey, you'll say Placheta is massively left-footed, and he spun him back onto his right foot and finished into the far corner. It was a pretty neat turn and finish, but disappointing if you're a defender, because you probably, even though he is left-footed, you probably show him onto his left foot onto a much narrower angle, and a bit of a soft
and Dickey
goal.
Was playing on his preferred side there. I know you said it, and we've had discussions offline. Doesn't make much difference which side Dickey plays, but that is his preferred side. And I thought he went on some decent foraging runs, but he didn't really have people to pass to. They weren't finding the spaces, were they?
No, that's right. So it's a bit disappointing goal overall to give away, and then of course you're on a back foot then against a side that make it difficult to get the ball back off of, and we did quite well against them, in fairness, in terms of winning the ball, but they suck a load of time out the game, and at 1-0 up, that's timing on your side, is it?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm talking about time. I mean, there was 2 minutes in the first half and only 5 in the second with all those substitutions. I still haven't worked out. Referees seem to be applying their own rules to time added on, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're just making it up.
You've seen the goal on the highlights, Ian. How did you see it? I've seen a battleship turn quicker than Rob Dickey did for the goal. But for me, it showed the commitment of the Norwich player chasing what looked a lost cause, and Tanner was nowhere near the bloke, was he?
No, and this is one reason there's a complaint that a lot of people levy against our fullbacks, is they don't get up the pitch enough. And I think that might demonstrate why they don't. We've Cam Pring's come under criticism for not getting up the field enough. George Tanner every week, our fullbacks didn't get up the field far enough. I've heard the manager say it, but they can't, because even when we have the lion's share of possession, there's always a threat in behind, because we haven't got anybody who can really give them the ball in a key area. And that lack of creativity is one of the reasons scoring more goals.
Yeah.
If you look at clear goal scoring opportunities, apart from at Hull, when we did have some because the ball was going in the box with better quality. And that's one of the. If I'm George Tanner or Cameron Pring, I think, hang on, if I'm going on a lung buster up the outside, am I going to get the ball? And how many times out of 10 am I going to get the ball? And at the moment, I reckon you'd be struggling to say any more than 3. And because of that lack of seeing a pass, creative, a pinger in midfield, then it's difficult for them to get forward. But I mean, Ross McCrory, Pearson almost admitted when they asked him what was McCrory's best position, he said, well, right back. He was brought in to replace George Tanner. And then we signed another guy who can play right back. So I think, I'm not saying George's days are numbered, but I'm saying there's going to be an awful lot of competition at right back. So depending on what injuries we get, we'll have to be moving players around the squad to fill holes here, there in in everywhere.
Well, they're utility players, something that when Gary comes on the podcast, he says we want specialists in their positions and not these.
Yeah, I like flexibility, and I think it's handy that you've got players like Cal Naismith that can play in midfield and can play that left centre-back role, but it's a question of where are they best. And my humble opinion is that I don't think George Tanner's a bad right back defensively, and he's come up against some very good players, and for me, he's done pretty well. But there's no doubt he's not. I think he can get forward, and I've seen him play some good crosses and hit some good shots. But it's creating those opportunities in open play for him to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think as well. You talk about utility. I think most people, when they start using that terminology, are using it in the slightly negative context of jack of all trades, master of none. But I think, Ian's just mentioned Cal Naismith. Cal Naismith's not a jack of all trades, master of none.
No.
He's we look at someone like Taylor Gardner-Hickman, who can play right back, can play centre midfield. You only got to look back at Alex Scott, haven't we? He can play multiple roles and positions.
He did a good job. He played virtually that season in that right back, and I think he looked pretty decent in that role. I mean, for me, right back last night, you could have given, because Tanner was poor, and going forward, definitely poor. I've liked it when Sykes has played right back a few times in there, because at least he's going forward and he likes to tackle. He can put a foot in. Dave, what did you think of Roberts last night? I thought he looked effective pre-season, but when he's come on, he seems a bit. On that form, to me, he's not challenging Pring, which at one stage we thought he might.
I think it is. I think he just, circumstantial last night, that the ability for him to get forward and show what he can do on the ball was, came up against what I think, even with several changes, was a pretty good, decent Norwich side. And I think second half we start to see him drift in field a little bit, and that create a little bit more room. But first half, I don't think the opportunities were there for him. I thought he had a steady game. I think defensively he did his job. We just didn't, get the most out of him. And I think that if you watch that game back, I reckon you'd probably say most players had a close to a 6 out of 10, but there wasn't enough players, there wasn't, we didn't have 3 or 4
sevens in there, was it?
No, there wasn't enough. I think people like Joe Williams, I think had a probably was our best player last night. Gets a load of unnecessary stick, I think, because of his injury form, rather than people actually watching how he performed. Number of times he nicked balls last night and got Sykes going forward, or got the ball out to Cornick or whatever. I think he was decent, but even then, I wouldn't say he got a 7. He was probably a 6.5.
Yeah, I was calling like you were at the start of the recording today. I thought late on in the game when we're, I know both of you have said don't really want to cut run this year, but we're 1-0 down, chasing the game. Could have tried the Viner and Dickey combination in readiness maybe for Saturday and push Cal Naismith into midfield, but. Ian, 2 players that were, going to be signed in the summer, but we got them in January. Goodness me, Cornick and Mehmeti. I tweeted earlier this morning, we coached the joy out of Mehmeti? But, I mean, the pair of them, take Cornick's long throws away. And, okay, he did reasonably well at Hull Friday night. I saw the whole game. But I put on Twitter, they're not really any better than what we've got, because you say Cornick and Mehmeti, Sykes and Bell, that's the alternatives, but Mehmeti's having a bit of a torrid time, Ian, isn't he, in particular?
Well, I think that the phrase you used was coach the joy out of him, and he doesn't look the player currently that he was when he first came in, because when he first came in, he was putting in some effective crosses. I remember one particular one, I think it was against Wigan in a night game that Rob Atkinson headed in. Excellent cross. The issue, you mentioned Roberts, and I think the issue is Roberts was looking good against lesser teams. He's now up against championship defenders, and it's a world of difference, because you're not playing against, with great respect to League One players, you're not playing against big lumps or blokes who are possibly on the way up. You're playing against honed in zone guys, some of whom have played in the Premier League. and they as well as being big, strong, athletic defenders, that they can play football. And that's the difference. Is that quality of player. Just for a laugh, before the game started last night, I wrote down the subs that I thought Nigel Pearson would make, and I got 3 out of 4 right. And that makes, I think we're a bit predictable. In fact, I think we're very predictable in how we play, and we're easy to play against, particularly when we're at home.
Yeah.
And which is why I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it tweaked. Not.
Well, I heard you say that on Radio Bristol last night, Ian.
Not rip it up and start again.
No.
But tweaked in order to make us more threatening at home. And it, all I was suggesting was play an extra striker and leave out a holding midfield player. Although, in fairness, Dave hit on this. We're not really playing with a double pivot. We're playing with a single pivot, and Joe Williams pushed further on, trying to break up play in the final third possibly. But in that position, Joe's going to get opportunities that he's unlikely to take.
Because of his lack of finishing capability.
Well, no, that isn't his strength. You wouldn't sign Joe Williams as a player and say, right, this is a bloke who's going to get us 10 goals a season from midfield. You just wouldn't, because that ain't the player he is.
No.
So if you're going to play with, if you at least play, more like an 8 than a 6, one alternative, you could play with 2 8s, and you could use TGH and Knight as your 8s and play Matty James as the pivot. I thought at Hull we were more of a 4-1-2-3 rather than a 4-3.
I mean, look, Pearson said after Hull, if we play like that every week, we'll win a lot of games. Yeah, and I sort of inclined to agree with him, having watched the full 90 minutes. Dave, do you think we're predictable at home?
I think what we're struggling with at home is the ability to play through the middle of the pitch. So everything, some people might have read. I wrote an article pre-season, and there was a little bit in there about last season in the second half of the season when we switched from the back 4, and the kind of formation we're seeing now. I call it kind of 3 Buffalo girls go round the outside, because the only way we could create was going round the outside. And pre-season, take on board is against lesser opposition, but there was those balls into Scott and Knight and Vyman, where they could take the ball on a half turn in the centre from a good ball from someone like Dickie or Viner, and then they'd be at their defence. And we've not been able to do that very well in the home games. And I think if we look at how we did that the other night against Hull, we opened them up in the middle of the pitch. But I think you have to give a lot of credit to oppositions as well. And I think we've played actually 4 top half teams so far, and we've, results wise, we haven't done too bad. Are they going to be top half teams at the end of the season? Not,
well,
maybe,
say,
but they might not be. They might not be, the best side. But Preston, Birmingham, Millwall, they're all disruptors. They're all teams that base their game on stopping you playing, and therefore, I think until we've seen a bit more alternative opposition, I don't think we'll know whether it's a home hoodoo or what. I think we've showed that we can attack, because against Hull, and I think we controlled the game against Millwall and ground them down and started creating chances because of the types of sides they are. So I think we'll get a better indication as well on Sunday against Swansea as well.
Saturday lunchtime against Swansea.
It's been moved.
Swansea team, certainly under Russell Martin, they like to play football. They've lost a lot of players, I think, in the window, haven't they? But they've
well, he's at Southampton now, Dave.
Yeah, so they got.
That's what I mean. No, he's like they used to play under Russell Martin.
They're under change, aren't they now? So this is, to me, they lost last night to Bournemouth. I think this is a good time to play them, and we'll get another sense of how do we play against certain sides. And I think, I think once we get to the next window, we'll have not window, sorry, the next international break when we would have probably played 10 or 11 games.
We'll have played 11, Dave, by the next international break.
We'll have a better idea of what type of side we are. I think we are a little bit into looking at, probably overthinking it, but without thinking about who we've actually played against. And I think those sides, Preston always give us a tough game. We have a slightly better record against them, but they stick players in places and they push up and they go 3v3 at the back and they condense the midfield. So it's not surprising there was no room in that game against them to play. And similarly, Birmingham, I thought we were masters of our own downfall, really, and giving the ball away cheaply and making them look a better side than they actually were. So we'll see. I'm not going to get too down on it at the moment.
Okay. Well, we need to get a point. We need to get at least a point at Swansea. I tweeted this last night. We need to get a point, because if we get a point, then from the opening 5 games, it goes, 1-3-1, I think it would be then, wouldn't it? Yes, is that right? Yeah. And that's not great. And I called that a C+ season. Ian, Ephraim Yeboah, another youngster, Steve Lansdowne, said, we'll produce a £25 million player every season and build up the nest egg. Notwithstanding Tommy Conway looking to be the most player likely to maybe live up to that billing. But as part of maybe changing things a little, would you start Yeboah on Saturday, or do you think he's just as a 17-year-old good to bring him on? But if you're chasing the game, has he got that composure that you might need? I'd run him from the start. What do you think?
Personally, I'd start him either in that game or in the next home game against West Brom. Basically, because we're not scoring goals, particularly at home. And what's the worst that could happen? He goes in, he doesn't do very well. You hook him. You know what you've got on the bench. You've got the likes of it'd probably be Cornick that would be left out, but you've got him to bring on. So if it doesn't go well, and we've seen Nigel Pearson hook Alex Scott after 21 minutes, so we know he can do it. So in the absence of nothing else, look, if we go out and bring in a powerful striker who can hold the ball up on loan, give him a start. But on the basis
ain't gonna happen.
On the basis we're not going to do that, I'd give him a go. Could possibly be, and I say a slight tweak to the formation, a 4-1-3-2. And I think all of our strikers, it's my opinion, all of our strikers are better and have shown better form in a 2 than a 1. And that, let's see if that helps. All right, the wheels could come off. We could lose a game. It could be a terrible idea, and I could be completely wrong. And if that's the case, I'd put my hands up. But it's not. We're not going to score less goals than we're scoring, are we?
No, that's very true. Dave, would you be bold and give Yeboah a start? What qualities have you seen him in the cameos that we've had him appearing on the pitch so far?
I think it's pace and rawness, and desire. All those kind of things that are good attributes to have in a young player. But no, I wouldn't start him on Saturday.
You wouldn't. He's got a touch of the Semenyo's about him, because he seems to have good upper body strength. And talking about Semenyo, he scored that goal against Liverpool, and I watched a chunk of that Bournemouth. Bournemouth, who they were playing at the weekend? Tottenham weekend. He seems he featured well there. But would you agree with me that Yeboah's got that sort of he's brought strong shoulders? He's not massive, but would you agree with that?
No, I think he's got those physical attributes. So hopefully he'll continue to develop. And just see that Zane on the YouTube feed said Yeboah is class, needs to start against Swansea. But I think in fairness to the lad, he's come on and he's had a couple of cameos. But Saturday, if we're sat here today thinking about who's going to play, I think he's going to play Gardner Hickman at right back, and I think he's going to play Mark Sykes on the right side of the 3 up front. And
then do you think he'll do Dickey? Do you think he'll do Viner and Dickey and push Cal into midfield?
Possibly, yeah. I don't know. That's the kind of bit of an unknown. I think he'll go back to. He might play Viner and Naismith. Dickey's he wasn't overly complimentary about Dickie last night, was he? So, and having got sent off, that he still, I guess, blotted his copybook to some extent. But and I think it'll be Wells, and I guess the question is who plays left side of the forward line. But we've actually got some options in midfield. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's James, Naismith, and Knight.
As a
I think that'd be a bit unfair on Joe Williams, who I think is probably
But as you always say, Dave, it's not about formations and 11s. It's a 19-man, a 20-game match day squad, even though we can't fill the bench at the moment. All right, I think that's the game done to death. Transfer window's approaching. We all heard Nigel's interview last night. Ian, Nigel, do you think the goalposts have been altered the last 2 weeks compared to what we were being led to believe 2 months ago? Is that your view, Ian?
Yes, I think my view, and it seems to be the view of an awful lot of City fans, and I can only go by people I talk to in social media, but that's an awful lot of people across a variety of age groups. Everybody was pretty happy with the transfer window up until the sell of Alex Scott. And most people accepted that we would sell Scott if the right offer came in, and it appears the right offer came in. Now, whether that was 20 plus 5, whether it was 25, I don't know, in all honesty. But it would appear to me that it was more likely to be 20 plus 5 in add-ons, but we sold him, and obviously he hadn't kicked a ball yet because he had quite a bad knee injury, which Bournemouth knew about and City made them aware of when they bought him. So there's no con job there. And I think most City fans, certainly the really sensible ones, thought, well, we won't spend all of it, but we'll probably spend something approaching 4 to 5 million and bring in the reinforcements that we need, given the long-term injuries that we've got. And the injury situation seems to be ongoing. And when we get one player back, another one will go out, and that seems to be the way of the world. So, and what we've done is we brought in Taylor. Looks at a decent signing. West Brom fans didn't really want him to go. That's always a good sign. And that's on an option of a purchase for 1.3 million next summer. Now, that's an option. So that money's committed, if you will. But if we get to the end of the season and he's really not all that, we can send him back.
Well, he just goes. It doesn't happen. I mean, So you're saying it was good up to the Scott.
So at that point, I think fans are expecting, well, okay, who else are we going to bring in? Because I think we need a centre forward, a centre back. We could do with an experienced backup for Max, or actually what I prefer to is competition for Max. Because if you're talking about competition in every position, we haven't really got it for the goalkeeper. And I'd like, and another player I'd like to see us sign is a creative central midfield player. Now, I don't care if it's a loan. I don't care if it's perm, but I think we needed those reinforcements in our squad.
I mean, can I just say in there, you said about a creative midfielder, and on the basis that he signed a centre half in Dickie, so Viner, Dickie, and Dave. I know you said Naismith slots into the back four and has done for the last couple of games. But if you have a midfield of Knight, Naismith, and who's the other one?
James.
And who, sorry?
James.
Yeah, that trio, right? If you're going to go out and bring somebody in, they've got to be better than those three. And those three are pretty much, one of them is a Pearson favourite and justifies being on the pitch. The other one is the most creative player that we've got who can pick a pass, which is Naismith. And then the final one, Knight, we just paid £2 million for in the summer. So that little grouping there, right, seems a bit of a unit for me. And then you've got, as you say, as backup, people that can come in. If you force out one of those three from your starting lineup, they've got to be some some player. I mean, I come back, Dave. Let me ask you the same question about the back. Have the goalposts altered for Nigel? Because he said that's life. He seems resigned to his lot, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly feels like we've sold Scott and then Lansdowne's pulled the drawbridge up, hasn't it? That's what it seems to me. I'm flabbergasted. When I first heard Nigel talking about, we're near the top of our wage budget, I thought he's trying to be a bit clever here. He's making sure that we don't, we'll bring a couple of players in, but we don't want to pay over the odds for them because we've sold Alex Scott for 20 or 25 million. And he's also trying to be a bit canny with contract renewals, that our own players who we're trying to recontract don't get paid too much just because we've sold a player. And I thought, I can understand that he's playing it a bit sharp with the media. Good on him. That ain't the case, is it? Basically, we could hear last night from his interview with Sheridan Robbins that you could tell he would bring players in if he could. And I think, Ian said he talked to some sensible fans, and I think no one's expecting us to go out and spend 5 million on 3 or 4 players, as in 15 or 20 minutes. No one's expecting that. I was expecting we might go out there and do a couple of deals in the kind of profile of player and cost of player in the realms of McCrory and Knight type signings.
Yeah, and even if Taylor Hickman had been signed as part of that 4, and I know that wasn't feasible necessarily at the time, if he'd been signed at that 4, you'd have looked at it and you thought first division, Championship, West Brom, moving to better himself. That was a good signing. Yeah. So
the only reason West Brom have let him go is because they can't get rid of people like Moa and Chalobah who are on 35, 40 grand a week.
Yeah. So
they've had to sacrifice. Corberan's come out and done a good sales pitch on it in effect, and and said, well, he can't get in I've got 5 midfielders and only 2 can play, but there's no way that they'd have got rid of Gardner Hickman over the others if they could have got rid of Mowat, they'd have saved a lot more money on Mowat than they would saved on loan with an option to buy for us. And I think we've been quite smart in terms of knowing that that's probably the case and making sure we've got that option on there, because it'd been very easy just to loan him for the season and give him back. And the rumours coming out from somebody who appears to be pretty well informed at West Brom is we've paid a 700k loan fee as well. So it's almost like a £2 million transfer in effect if it all goes through, which I don't think is unreasonable for a player who's got 30, 40, 50
but it just backs
championship
up your point that we need to get players that are better than what we've got. That's the sort of money that we need to be spending. I'll call it.
We need first team players.
1.8. We'll call it 2 to 2.5 million. And McCrory, I mean, it is fine margins. It is bad luck, and losing McCrory, who was along with Knight, 2 damn good signings. Yeah, we've lost McCrory, and no hope of him coming back. Yeah, in the foreseeable future.
Yeah. I think we have to wait and see what his
worrying
diagnosis is, don't we?
Yeah. Just conscious of time on today's recording. Ian, international break coming up. It's probably the difference between 8 points, which would be a great start to the season, 6 points, which would be, I give it a C+, or 5 points from 5 games. Yeah. If we lost, no pressure on Nigel now. But then if you look at the games before the next international break, there's another 6 that are coming up, which is West Brom home, Plymouth home, Leicester away, Stoke at home, Rotherham away, Leeds away. Yeah. If I say we want to be averaging 1.25 points a game as a minimum by the time we get to the quarter stage of the season. Would you agree with that?
Well, if the point you made about Swansea, if we beat Swansea and we got 8 points, then that would mean you're averaging about 1.6, which is
72 points. Simple extrapolation.
74 over a season. 73.6. If you want to be pedantic, but and that would be a good effort if we were able to maintain it. And look, if we did get ourselves in a situation where we were drawing it home and winning away. That's not the worst thing in the world.
No.
But my fear is we don't know when Ross is going to be back, and our best wishes go to him, because no footballer. It's one thing having an injury and thinking, well, you know, I've got a broken toe or something, and it's going to be healed in 2 weeks. When you've got that kind of infection, it's not just getting rid of it; it's getting back to fitness.
It's a recovery. It's a recovery period,
and those things hit you for 6. So, great sympathy to him. I've only, I've watched him on TV play for Aberdeen, and I've seen the highlight clips on YouTube. And he's another. He strikes me as a bit of a right-footed Cal Naismith, but younger version of. So I'm looking forward to seeing him play. And that's why I say I think everybody was happy with our transfer activity up to the point that Steve Lansdowne said, no, we're not going to, we're not going to increase the wage bill, whatever happens. But we've just increased our annual turnover by 20 million quid, possibly 25 million quid, however you look at it. And then, because I thought the money from Semenyo was funding the summer activity. Now, the communication that came out was, well, we don't need to sell Alex Scott. And once again, like Dave said earlier, you're thinking, well, yeah, that's quite good PR, because you're saying to the marketplace, well, yeah, we'll sell him if we get the right bid, but we're quite happy to stay. And he's quite happy to stay because he wasn't agitating for a move or going on strike or anything like that. So, I mean, I think if we were to win at Swansea, I think that would be, and that's not beyond the realms of us, because the way Swansea play will suit us, and the way they're playing at the moment is they're scoring goals, and they're quite good going forward, but they're not very good at the back. Now that might suit us because we can play a bit deeper and we can hit them with our pace on break, which is another reason I might play Yeboah.
But I think you'll get minutes. I think he won't start. He probably won't start, but he'll get minutes.
Let's put it this way. I think, but at home particularly, we need to try. You could say, well, what we've done so far, we're picking up an average of 2 points a game away from home. Fantastic. If we can keep going like that, brilliant. Don't change anything. But at home, we can't accept picking up half a point per home game. So looking at it as a glass half full or a glass half empty, you say, right, what can we do to affect that? Okay, we're going to make a bit of a tweak. Listen, if it don't work, it don't work. Go back to what you were doing.
Yeah.
But you can't just, that thing about if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, is very prevalent. Yeah. And that's the way, try it.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not saying play 5 forwards or play 7 in midfield or go, I'm just saying tweak it. And the guys and the coaches are good enough to coach that. Christ.
Yeah. Dave, I mean, I think, as the guys on Radio Bristol said last night, you're not going to rip it all up and start all over again with a new formation or anything like that. But effectively, we did that at the end of the calendar year because we've been playing 3 at the back. Do you think with the players that we've got now, and that's excluding the ones that are injured, do you think that they could switch to a back 3 of, say, Viner, Dickey, and Naismith? Yes.
I don't think there's any need to.
You don't. So you stick with the formation. All right.
Yeah.
And going into
no. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think there are different ways you can play it. Sorry, it's my Ring doorbell going off. I'm, long in the belief that, and this goes back to my own playing days as a kid, like playing under 13 football, where 4-3-3 was the formation we played, and basically we played with a right winger, a left winger, and a centre forward, and the 3 never saw each other all game. And I think what we've done since losing Antoine Semenyo is we've lost the connection between at least 2 of them. And if we go back to that slightly, it was only kind of end of December, January, where we had Sykes started to score some goals, and he was predominantly playing wide on the right, but he'd cut in or be at the back post ready to have it. But we had Semenyo playing a lot closer to Conway initially, and then Wells. So we almost had an inside left, a centre forward, and a right winger. So we had a very lopsided front three, and I think that was why we were able to, Wells, it doesn't matter he didn't score many goals last season. I think he's actually looked really sharp this season, and I think he played well last season as well.
No, he looks fit and healthy and everything, yeah.
And we even saw for 20 minutes on Friday night, however long it was, the impact Cornick can have if he's central and he's got players a bit closer to him as well. And so I think we just need, it's probably a tweak. I think we do need someone closer to Naki, and if that means we have to play lopsided, then that's what we do. So I'd be almost tempted to play, Naki and Cornick as more of a two, even if that means we play, and that means someone like Pring's going to have to, probably do a bit more covering, or the left hand side of the three in midfield is probably going to have to play a little bit wider when we haven't got the ball. And I do see that the benefits without the ball of the front three, because it does stop teams getting out through their fullbacks, and in some respects we did that quite well against Norwich last night. We did stop them playing the way they wanted to play. So as I say, I don't think we need to rip it all up, but we need to, certainly when we've got the ball, or if we're going to have to go long from the back, we've got to make a concerted effort to get someone around Naki Wells, and for me that's one of the two wider forwards has got to get there, not someone breaking forward from midfield. They're the once the ball's up there and it's dropping that they need to be there, not for that initial ball up there. And that's sometimes why we then get a little bit kind of caught in our midfield, is because we've, the number 10, if it's been Vyman's attacking instincts are so strong that as soon as that ball goes forward, he's making that run. But sometimes he's made it a bit too soon before we've established possession. And I think that's where we've kind of fallen down in this formation a little bit. So I think it's a bit about some subtle tweaks to it. And I don't think it takes more than that. I think we've got some decent players. I think the worst thing to do would be to panic and kind of throw it in the bin and start again, because I don't think it's a million miles away.
Yeah. Okay. Good points there. And you say some decent players. Obviously, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Owner thinks we've got some decent players. He thinks that we got a squad that's better than Luton's squad. Therefore,
and being clear, Dave, I don't think anybody said, and certainly I haven't, rip it up and start again. I'm saying, I think that the comment Steve made about developing a £25 million player every year, I think that was probably said a little bit tongue in cheek, but I hope it was.
Why does he set the wage budget? And I know you can have a whole playing budget, you can have a wage budget, you can have a transfer budget, but I see no reason whatsoever to set the wage budget as constrained as it is. It to me, it's bonkers, and to me, I feel like he's setting up Nigel to fail. It's almost like, well, I'm going to constrain it. If you do well with it, well, I've proved my point. And if you
grudging, look, I've said it on Twitter. He is scant in his praise of Nigel. And when you look at what Nigel's done, okay, his playing record is open to question by a lot of people. But when you look at what he's done with the wages and getting it all the way down, and he's had a slap in the face from Lansdowne, I think. That's my view. I think you'd agree with that as well, Ian. You've as good as said that, Dave.
I just think it would never surprise me, now that Lee Johnson's had the sack at Hibernian, if Nigel Pearson went for one or another, you could call it mutual consent, he might just get cheesed off and walk, but I think he's probably too experienced to do that. I don't think Stephen Lansdowne is giving the same support to Nigel Pearson that he gave to Lee Johnson and Mark Ashton. And I think,
go on.
And I think he, like Dave said, no one in their right mind is saying go out and spend 15 million quid on new players. But what we are saying is that we need a stronger squad to be able to compete at the right end of the table. And I don't think if we went out and we brought in 2 or 3 quality players, it would necessarily mean we make the playoffs, but it give us a hell of a lot more chance. And what there seemed that there was a level of discontent, I'll put it no stronger than that, amongst the fans when the communication was made that we wouldn't be strengthening any further in this window. And it wasn't just people on podcasts like me or people that are active on Twitter that were saying it. It was lots and lots and lots of people.
If you look at it, Ian, in terms of what Nigel Pearson's done, he's cleared out a load of dead wood. He's cleared out a load of high cost. And if we look at the wage bill when he took over was 30 million quid.
Yeah.
By my estimates, I think it's going to be round about 18, 20 this year. And that's not all football club. That, not all playing side. That's, including loads of admin people as well. So over a period of 3 seasons, he'll have probably saved somewhere. If we'd have carried on at those costs, he'd have probably saved us 25 million in wages.
Yeah.
And amortization, that was at 12 million at peak. It then went down to 9 and down to 6, and I predict it's going to be about 2.5. He saved another 20 odd million off that high cost base that we had.
And he's blooded a young player who's gone on and raised them 25 million in transfers.
And the 10 million France. So I think he's about, like, I can't remember what numbers I've just done there, but he's about 60 or 70 million in credit in my book, in terms of what would have happened if we'd have carried on spending what we're doing. To not allow him to sign some players is absolutely. And I know he doesn't want a big squad, and I think we're all saying the same here. If we'd have turned around after Alex Scott's sell and signed two more Jason Knight types, not necessarily his position,
everyone would have been happy.
And he hasn't been allowed to do it. It's absolutely crazy. And I think, this is where we need to hear from, and I put it on a tweet last night, we need to either hear from the owner, we need to hear from the chairman, who's the owner's son, or we need to hear from the CEO. And even then, the CEO is only really carrying out the instructions of the owner. So, I think we need to hear from Steve Lansdown.
Well,
personally,
I think
he's letting people down, and if that reason is because he don't want to stick the money in while he's trying to sell the club, just come out and tell us that. Yeah, but at the moment, he's given us false promise, and I think in that interview in Guernsey, sorry, I'll shut up in a second. He actually said
Dave, what you're saying is 100% behind what
actually
you're saying.
It wasn't his Guernsey interview. It was an interview that he did with Tim Shires about 10 years ago, where he said, sometimes you just got to give the fans hope. Well, he's completely got rid of that, hasn't he? Because actually, I see it. I'm pretty positive, aren't I? And I feel completely
I've not heard you
disillusioned with that side of the club at the moment.
It's more about what's going on behind the scenes that's creating your negativity.
Well, I think it's that lack of clarity with the fans. If Steve Lansdown has come out and said, right, now we've sold Alex Scott, past the loan with an option deal we've done for Taylor Gardner-Hickman, we will not be spending any more money in the transfer market, because then I think fans, they might not like it, and I don't think they would like it, but at least they'll say, well, all right, the communication's clear, we know what's going on. They wouldn't blame Nigel Pearson, because everybody's lining up to take credit for cutting the wage bill. Richard Gould, John Lansdown, everybody's taking credit for it. Now, the person at the sharp end has been Nigel Pearson, who has, I'll put it in parentheses, suffered because of that lack of funding. I mean, no manager, or I don't think any manager, if they went to Nigel Pearson tomorrow and say, look, hang on, Nigel, we've got to think about this. There's 5 million quid to spend if you can go out and bring in the right 2 or 3 players. I don't think he's going to say, no, I don't want them. He said last night, I'm a pragmatist, I'm a realist. We are where it's where we are. And we continually hear this phrase, it's where we are. And I think fans are rightly saying, well, when will we be in, when will we not be, or let's put this.
When will we be in a place where we can see we're heading in the right direction,
in the right place? Yeah. What is the right place? When do we get there? Because I agree with Dave. I heard an interview with Steve Lansdown, and he got on to, well, what should the wage bill be? And the figure he quoted was 18 to 20 million. And my guess is we're there.
Yeah, Dave just said.
He's already said his guess is we're there.
It's not even playing budget though, is it? That's
No.
That's wages for the football club, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a lot of people. You go down to that club, and I speak to people who are, respected people in the local community. You say, well, I've been going down the city for years, and I know everybody down there. And I remember years ago, you knew everybody. You went down, and now you see hundreds of people wandering about the place in Bristol City training gear, and you ain't got a clue who they are. And I'm
200
not saying,
employees.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a terrible thing or anything's badly run or whatever, but we lost a fortune in the last 2 financial years. I mean, absolute king's ransom. And
Dave, sorry, and Dave and I were talking offline yesterday because Exile Robin put a tweet out saying, we're a club, we can't expect Lansdowne to keep putting his hand in his pocket because we're a club that's losing £92,000 a week, right? £92,000 a week. And you think, well, hang on a minute, why are we losing £92,000 a week? What is fundamentally wrong with our cost base when you look at, okay, I use Birmingham as an example alongside Millwall and Preston, but alongside Millwall and Preston, who have both been better than us over the last few years, they haven't got a benefactor to lose 92,000 a week. They go bust. Dave,
what's happened to you can spend what you generate, which was this previous mantra. That's gone out the window. I think that's really why we're struggling as fans, is that we've not been told why things have changed. And the expectation of Tinian came out, we've got a plan A with Alex Scott, we've got a plan B without him. Well, Taylor Gardner-Hickman wasn't the plan B without him, was it? That's a reaction from McCrory.
I think he was signed because of the extent of the problem that McCrory has. And I think that was, he had no option but to let him do that. Yeah. And getting back to the point about the money, it would have been, if Lansdowne had said to the fans, right, we've had 25 million for Alex Scott, 20 plus 5, because I think because of Scott's injury, I think that's why we've got 20 plus 5 rather than straight 25, right? Because we needed the money in this year's accounts. But if Lansdowne had said, all right, Nigel, you're going to have a quarter of that fee to spend on a combination of wages or transfers as you think fit, everybody would have said, live with that. But the communication, there has been a distinct lack of communication. I mean, there's somebody on the staff there who's called director or communications officer. I think that's Roger Barton. Yeah. Somebody needs to front up. Somebody needs to front up pretty damn soon and say,
I think that's why, Dave, I think that's why Nigel Pearson's interview last week before the whole game, the kind of one with the Bristol Post and Radio Bristol, I think he sounded a little bit cheesed off, not because he's in a mood, but I think he's constantly being asked to front up on questions about transfers and contracts. It's not his role. He's told us that. Of course, he's involved in the process and things like that, but that's not his job, and we're not hearing from anyone else. And in fairness, that's a big problem.
Whilst we had mouth on a stick, Mark Ashton always there when things were good, right? When Richard Gould was here, he struck the balance. He was there when it mattered. He got taken down. He made a couple of interviews he did where he probably didn't say too much. He didn't manage it well. But Gould was there as a figurehead that you thought Gould and Pearson combined seemed a good combo. Whereas we've picked up somebody who was recommended to Steve Lansdowne by Richard Scudamore, who has been conspicuous by his absence in terms of any fronting up of anything. And if you read on the Palace forums what he did, Phil Alexander, he's probably a lovely guy, but he had nothing to do with the playing side. Everything he did was commercial. And when you're a Premier League club, the commercial opportunities to exploit and develop are a lot different to being a Championship club, which we are.
And to be fair, there's probably a lot of commercial stuff that needs sorting out as well.
Not least the away kit. Anyway,
guys,
we could talk all day about this. And thanks, Sam, your comment on there. Brilliant topical pot. Yeah, we should have maybe done less on the game because it was not a game to forget, but less on the game and more on this. But I say some of us have got jobs to do, like that means mainly me. I shouldn't have time off. Dave, great to have you on again, and let's sort of have it. You know, if it's once a month or something like that, it'd be good to have you on. Happy 18th birthday to your lad Joe at the weekend. So I know you've got a big weekend lined up for that. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Joe.
I'll be with you on Saturday tea time, where we'll do a review of the Swansea game. I'm hoping it's going to be that we come back from South Wales with something, yeah. But in the meantime, everybody, as always, all 1,000+ of you, thanks for listening. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Cheers all.
God bless everybody.